The late 17th century. The name William Kidd was known not as a terror of the seas, but as a respectable gentleman and an esteemed captain from New York. He lived in prosperity and had absolutely no thoughts of a pirate's life. But fate had other plans. Powerful British lords decided to clear the Indian Ocean of maritime marauders. They needed an experienced and impeccably honest man. The choice fell on Kidd. He was granted a letter of marque, an official document from the king himself, authorizing him to capture enemy vessels and hunt down corsairs. For this mission, the Adventure Galley was built, a 34-gun galley frigate, a true masterpiece of shipbuilding of its time. Kidd bid farewell to his family, anticipating triumph and wealth. He was absolutely certain he was serving the law. The captain could not have suspected that this magnificent ship would become his curse, and that his powerful patrons would abandon him to his fate at the very first sign of danger. From the very beginning of the expedition, everything went awry. The ocean proved empty, there was no plunder, and fierce scurvy began to decimate the crew. Months of grueling sailing turned the men into a bitter mob. They demanded gold. They urged him to spit on the royal commission and rob any ship that crossed their path. Kidd desperately tried to maintain discipline, but a mutiny was brewing with every passing mile. The point of no return came during a clash with the gunner, William Moore. He was openly inciting the crew to rebel and insulting the captain in front of everyone. Kidd's nerves, pulled taut as ship's rigging, finally snapped. In a blind rage, he grabbed the first thing at hand, a heavy, iron-bound wooden bucket, and delivered a crushing blow. Moore crumpled to the deck and, by the next day, fell silent forever. The captain, sworn to uphold the law, had just crossed a line from which there was no return. After that fateful bucket incident, the crew spiraled completely out of control. To avoid a full-scale mutiny, Kidd was forced to yield to his own men. Soon, a target appeared on the horizon that made crossing half the globe worthwhile, the massive vessel, the Quebec Merchant. Its holds were bursting with the finest silks, silver, and gold. It was the ultimate prize, the kind every buccaneer secretly dreams of. Kidd seized the ship, justifying his actions by the French passes found on board, which meant that under his letter of marque, everything was strictly legal. The loot was staggering, the crew rejoiced, and the captain believed he had triumphantly fulfilled his mission. But he failed to account for one vital detail. The cargo belonged to deeply influential figures within the powerful East India Company. By claiming these treasures, Kidd had crossed the path of the wealthiest corporation of his time. News of the audacious capture of the Quebec Merchant reached London with incredible speed. The East India Company was furious, demanding immediate retribution. Those very same high-ranking lords who had so recently shaken Kidd's hand and sponsored his expedition were thrown into an absolute panic. To save their own reputations and deflect any suspicion, they made the only convenient move available to them: they publicly disowned their captain. In a single stroke, the British government declared William Kidd the most notorious pirate in the world. A massive bounty was placed on his head, and naval squadrons were given strict orders to capture him at any cost. The unsuspecting captain sailed back to America, utterly convinced he was bringing the crown untold riches, when in reality, he was sailing straight into a trap. Approaching his native shores, William Kidd was horrified to learn that he had been declared the greatest pirate of the era. Realizing that a trap awaited him in the port, he made a maneuver that etched his name into history forever. The captain approached the small Gardiners Island and buried a portion of his untold riches deep in the earth. This was his ultimate trump card for future negotiations with the authorities. He hoped to exchange the coordinates of the stash for his freedom. It was this desperate move that gave rise to a legend that has driven thousands of adventurers mad. Since then, the shores have been dug up far and wide, but the lion's share of that colossal prize has never been found. Having secured a portion of the gold, Kidd decided to play his hand openly. He went to the governor of Boston, Richard Bellomont, one of the very lords who had originally issued his letter of marque. The captain believed he could prove his innocence, handing over the French passes from the captured ships to the governor. But Bellomont had absolutely no interest in the truth. To save his own career and clear his name before the London elite, the governor cold-bloodedly betrayed his associate. Instead of negotiations, Kiid was thrown into heavy shackles. His life-saving documents mysteriously vanished into the archives, while the skipper himself was left to rot in a cold, solitary cell. In the filthy hold of a prison ship, a shackled Kiid was transported across the ocean straight to London. There, a high-profile show trial awaited him, playing out more like a political spectacle. It was a matter of survival for the captain's former patrons to turn him into a scapegoat, burying this inconvenient scandal once and for all. The court cold-bloodedly ignored every argument from the defense. Those very French passes that could have fully exonerated Kiid were never presented to the jury, they were deliberately hidden deep within the archives. In the end, the captain was found guilty on 2 counts, piracy on the high seas, and that fatal blow with a bucket that ended the life of the mutinous sailor. The verdict was a foregone conclusion. The man who had set sail to defend the interests of the crown was now forced to publicly answer for the greed of others. On a May day in 1701, the exhausted captain was brought to the London docks. A massive crowd had gathered to witness the final moments of the great skipper. But even the climax of this tale was steeped in cruel irony. When the executioner carried out the sentence, the rope could not bear the weight and snapped. By ancient maritime tradition, this was considered an act of God, and the condemned man was supposed to be pardoned on the spot. However, the British lords needed an ironclad example. The execution was ruthlessly repeated a second time. William was then bound in a heavy iron cage and suspended directly over the River Thames, so this macabre spectacle would serve as a grim warning to all passing ships for years to come. Thus ended the journey of the accidental pirate. Yet, Kiid left behind something far greater, an everlasting legend. The maps of his buried treasure still captivate the imagination, inspiring new generations of adventurers to believe that the ultimate prize is still out there, waiting. This concludes the story of William Kiid. Subscribe to the channel, friends, and see you on our next voyage.